Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stuart Turnbull. I'm a member of the Causeway Management Board, and welcome to this session this afternoon on a collaborative approach to addressing climate change. Just that little video there that was up was just giving you a little bit of a background to Causeway and today's events, and for particularly those that haven't dialed in to any Causeway event in the past, just to explain that Causeway is a business exchange network, really looking to sort of foster relationships between Scotland and Ireland in the sort of business sector across a wide range of businesses, both public, private, third sector, charity, and we host a number of events through the course of the year, from individual networking events to more formal seminars and presentations like today. And you saw a few of the slides there was some images from the recent awards dinner that was held in Edinburgh, sorry, which was a very good evening. If anyone's looking for a good dinner to go to next year, certainly recommend it to all of you. So that's a little bit about Causeway. Just the event itself. So year and a half ago or so, 2 years ago probably, we were looking to arrange a series of events at Causeway that on topics that would bring sort of cities together across Scotland and Ireland, and we had the overall theme of growing the cities in the sort of climate emergency, because we recognise that all cities are faced with those challenges. They've all got slightly different approaches to both achieving sustainable economic growth, but also in the very real world that we're living with, addressing the climate emergency. So we kicked off a session back initially in May last year, where we had speakers from Edinburgh, Glasgow, Belfast and Dublin, and then we picked up some topics around growth and sustainability, etc., and had a few discussion groups. And it was probably, I think it was the first sort of big event that we held as Causeway online just after the pandemic restrictions kicked in. So we had that. We then followed that up in November with a more focused session on setting climate reduction targets and how we might embed sort of climate emergency within decision-making process within projects. And we had speakers from Jacobs and Edinburgh Centre for Carbon Innovation at that session. And so we're looking to sort of go beyond, and what can we do? And obviously COP26 is only 10 days away. So we thought that we would try and get in before the crowds and arrange an event before the official COP26 activities kick in Glasgow and all around other cities, to be honest. And Causeway over recent months has been in various discussions and working closely with the respective chambers of commerce in the cities across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Ireland. So we came together with the chambers in Cork, Dublin, Edinburgh and Glasgow, and thought it would be good to hold in a sort of joint event, bringing in the sort of partners and networks within the four chambers, combined with the Causeway network, and see if we can arrange something. So again, with the COP26 coming, we've chosen the title A Collaborative Approach to Addressing Climate Emergency, and that's the purpose of this session today. So I'll just explain a little bit about how we'll run the session, and then introduce the speakers. So what we're very conscious of, particularly in a lot of the Causeway events, is to make sure that we give people a much opportunity to engage in the event. So we've deliberately set up the presentation and agenda today to allow sort of breakout groups and everybody to contribute, rather than just sort of formal presentations and questions. So what we're going to do is we'll have two short presentations, one from Dr. Roddy Yar at University of Strathclyde on some things that are in Glasgow, and he'll be followed by James Duggan from Arup, picking up a couple of points on Cork, and I'll cover their particular topics in a minute. We'll then have a breakout session for approximately 20 minutes, where everybody will be split into small groups with a facilitator, where we'll pose a couple of questions just for a bit of a discussion around some of the topics that Roddy and James will be covering. Then we'll come back to the main group again and we'll kick off with Chris Adams from City of Edinburgh Council covering the Edinburgh topic, and then Benjamin Bell from Tier Mobility touching on Dublin. We'll then go back out to the breakout groups, come back together again, and all being well with technologies and timekeeping, etc., we'll wrap up and close for 5:15 today. Should have just said at the start that we will be recording this event, as you know, because we're very keen that people would like to have come along but couldn't make it for whatever reason. So the formal presentation will be recording, but the breakout sessions aren't recorded. So for everyone's benefit, we've got, as usual on Zoom, I think most people will be familiar with how Zoom works now, but we've got the usual sort of chat function down the side, so feel free to pose questions, discussion topics, etc. As we're going through the process. Because the presentations themselves are just going to be very short introductory presentations, we won't have a sort of formal question session at the end of each of the 4 presentations, but what we will do is pick up some of the chat as we go into the breakout sessions. So without any further ado, we'll kick off. Just looking at my chat to make sure that I'm not getting any messages from any of my colleagues to say anything else, but I think we're good to go. So we'll kick off initially with a presentation from Dr. Roddy Yar, who's Executive Lead for Sustainability at University of Strathclyde. He leads a team that's looking after the sort of climate change and social responsibility plan and zero targets. And Roddy is going to talk about a project that he's involved in with the Neutral Innovation Project in Glasgow. So over to you, Roddy.
Thanks, Stuart. I'm glad to be here. Nice to see you all. I'll just share my screen and hopefully off we go. Everybody see that okay?
Yep.
Somebody say yes, excellent. Okay, yeah, so thank you for the introduction. I've got 5 minutes, so I'll be very brief. Yeah, Glasgow, COP26, here it is, we're here. It's complete and utter joy, but tinged with chaos and mayhem. So yeah, very much looking forward to the next few weeks. The climate neutral Glasgow City Innovation District, this is a concept that we came up with some time ago, working with partners across the city, including the City Chamber, useful allies and friends of the university. Our cities need to respond to the climate emergency. They need to respond to lots of constantly changing demands. COVID's a great example. But the changing climate is a huge imperative, obviously. And to tackle these issues, we need to do it together. I think that's fundamental. But we need to innovate, and we also have to be socially inclusive, whether that's business, community, visitors, whomever. That whole social inclusion concept is very much at the heart of what we're trying to do here. So my role is to really be the project lead for this concept. I realized very quickly in my job that collaboration is key, and so is a strong vision, and hopefully that's what we're bringing forward here, with good ideas and everybody kind of on the same page. That's the sort of objective thus far. So what this is in the Innovation District, which is an entrepreneurial investment zone in the heart of the city, with a range of partners. Hopefully you can see the concept and the geography right in the centre of Glasgow, if you're familiar with Glasgow, just in and around George Square, the transport infrastructure with the Clyde, River Clyde to the south, and I guess the top part just off the map, north of the Glasgow Royal Infirmary is the M8. So an innovation zone. But my concept, my thought around this piece of work is to make that innovation district climate neutral, to reflect the imperative that is before us at the moment. So this is the concept. It's basically 100% renewable heat, power, transport, climate adaptation, resilience if you like, and well-being plan for our community. Community being all things to all people, but very much around business, people, investors, people who live and work in the space, people who travel through the space. And this is the sort of concept. It's a 70-hectare area. Tens of thousands of people live here. We've got industry right on the banks of the Clyde. We've got the Tennant's Brewery you might be familiar with. We have areas of deprivation, and we have business and university and education right in the heart of this. So a whole mix. How do we make that climate neutral? And what do we mean by that? So what we're doing is a piece of work, technical work, which is just finished actually, and we've just presented the report to the Sustainable Glasgow board led by the council leader, presenting these facts and figures. Basically, we can achieve deep decarbonisation in the zone, 93% reduction from current baselines, and we can also make that zone resilient. And you can see the objectives listed there. What we're talking about is taking heat from the Clyde, basically, and distributing that into the zone, but also distributing other climate services, we're calling them, whether that's renewable energy from wind farms nearby on the south side of Glasgow, whether it's digital and communications, adaptation, improved drainage, more green space for people and for businesses. And we've got the numbers around that now, so we know what the prospect is, and you can see the figure there starts at 210 million. And that's of interest to investors in the city. So yeah, there's the Clyde. This is where we would take the heat from, at the bottom of High Street, which is the birthplace of Glasgow, the original kind of first street in Glasgow, hence the name. Taking that ambient energy from the River Clyde and really reimagining the Clyde and putting its natural resource to good use for the people of the city. So High Street, this is what it looks like today on the left, and this is our vision of what it should look like and could look like if we start to repurpose that space. Very much integrating our thinking into existing city plans for urban realm, which are existing and funded, but adding to those, thinking about district heating, communications, climate resilience, digital, more space for people, less vehicles in the city, all of which is aligned to the city's carbon plan. And we're very much working in partnership with our city partners to do that. I'll stop there. That's a whistle-stop tour, but hopefully that gives you a flavour of what we're up to on what is a hugely collaborative venture supported by a number of city stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Roddy. Was through of the project, and it's quite interesting to see just that last image about, you tend to think about just what's happening on the sort of street level, but just the whole thing about the project and much broader than that, and what it could do, and all the complexities, I guess, involved in pulling that together. And we'll watch the space, I guess, as things hopefully go forward. So thanks very much for that, Roddy. Right, we'll now cross the water to Cork, and I'll introduce James Duggan, who's a director in Arup with 25 years experience in civil and structural engineering, and is responsible for growing the relationship in sort of national and internationally, but particularly one of the areas that he's involved in is through digital transformation, through his role as a group digital leader. And James is going to talk to the project in Cork, where we're looking at smart buildings and urban development. Over to you, James.
Thank you, Stuart. Hopefully you can see my screen okay. So good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to present a brief overview.
Sorry, James, I think we just see you at the moment.
That's not right.
This is looking promising. Yeah, we are Cork. Better? Yeah, good to go.
Cool. That's better. Right, so without further ado, so thanks for the opportunity. I suppose what I'd like to do is take you through what's happening in Cork in relation to urban development, and touch on smart buildings as well. So I suppose there's huge potential for growth and development in Cork City, and this is underpinned by the availability of land for regeneration in the Docklands, and by national policy that identifies Cork as an international centre of scale and a national driver of economic and population growth. And just to look at some of the key facts, the population of Cork is predicted to grow by 50 to 60% by 2040. That's equivalent to a growth of approximately 125,000 people. The Docklands itself represents 147 hectares of land for regeneration, so a huge opportunity. And in the Docklands itself, there's, it can deliver circa 10,000 homes, sustaining a residential population of 25,000 people, circa 400,000 square meters of non-residential development with the potential to support up to 25,000 jobs. In delivering the economic potential of Cork, we need to be sustainable in approach to protect our city and deliver future prosperity and well-being. The influence of key stakeholders in making this happen is really important. In 2020, Cork Chamber initiated the Sustainable Cork programme with the expressed aim of refining and focusing activities on building economic resilience through the lens of the United Nations SDGs. In relation to the built environment, among others, one of the key challenges identified was to reduce the amount of carbon and waste being developed, with a key goal of establishing Cork as a centre of excellence for energy and carbon footprint efficiency. To realise its full potential, there are a number of key challenges that Cork needs to overcome. Resilience to climate change is one prime example. Built on the River Lee and adjacent to one of the largest natural harbours in the world, Cork City is susceptible to flooding. The Lower Lee Flood Relief Scheme brings the opportunity to safeguard existing property and also the means to facilitate future sustainable and resilient development. It also offers up the opportunity to develop a sense of place by developing new public realms and amenity spaces for people to meet and roam. The need to develop a sustainable transport system for the city also affords the opportunity to, in parallel, develop new public realm and active transport space. Cork City is still a city that relies heavily on cars, but initiatives such as the Cork Metropolitan Area Transport Strategy and projects such as Bus Connects seek to address this by developing a sustainable, reliable and frequent public transport system that envisages, among other things, rapid bus corridors and in time a light rail. Cork City will require the construction of a significant stock of new buildings and the refurbishment of existing ones. Here we need to be smart to ensure that we are sustainable in our approach and to ensure that we are catering for the needs, expectations and requirements of the next generation. Smart buildings will play a key role here. Smart buildings need to enable connectivity between the buildings, its systems and its users. They need to provide insights into their use such that problems can be quickly identified and so that they can be effectively used and maintained. And they also need to ensure that the environment for occupants is more productive and comfortable, thus promoting health and happiness. There are many examples in Cork of smart building systems, including intelligent building access systems and lifts, intelligent meeting room booking systems and desk booking systems, which have become very prominent in the latest pandemic, and obviously intelligent EV charging systems. There are therefore many quirky smart building systems, but in the context of this event, the most important ones relate to carbon reduction and energy efficiency. In this area, examples of what is happening in Cork include the use of smart technology and IoT to develop digital twins of our buildings, leading to the gathering of usage data and data analytics, with the expressed aim of increasing user comfort while reducing energy usage. Smart lighting systems to react to environmental changes in user requirements, and driven by the pandemic, the use of smart technology to manage air quality and air changes and to ensure that our workplaces are safe. These are just some of the examples where smart buildings are helping to deliver on the goals of the Sustainable Cork programme. But other areas that we're also involved in for local projects include reducing embodied carbon in buildings and employing circular economy techniques, both in buildings but also in construction and operational supply chains. So just a brief overview, but to conclude, there's a lot happening in Cork arising from its potential and national designation for growth. It is clear, however, that this can only happen in a sustainable and progressive manner through the cooperation and positive influence of all public and private stakeholders. Thank you.
Thanks very much, James. I think one thing that struck me in that presentation was 50 to 60% growth in population. I was just in a project this morning where we were talking about 20% growth at the same period, and we thought that was quite significant. But yeah, that's and it shows you, I guess, the challenges and opportunities, I guess, associated with the future of Cork over there. So thank you for that. Excellent. So far, keeping the programme. So what we're about to do now is go into these breakout groups. Now, the four speakers that I introduced at the start, each of them will be in a breakout group along with a member of the Causeway team, which, if I'm right in thinking, it'll be either myself, Megan, Bridget or Eugene, hopefully. And we're waiting. Aoife will do some magic behind the scenes and press a few buttons, and we'll all magically appear in one of the breakout groups. We'll take 20 minutes approximately in there, and there's 3 questions that we'll ask, and they'll appear in the chat in the groups. But based on what we've sort of just covered at the moment, there's the 3 topics we've got. One is the challenge and opportunities associated with developing climate neutrality within our buildings and cities. Nice easy one. Retrofitting historic city centres to embed new technologies, and how do we put people first when catering for growth within our cities? So 3 sort of fairly broad topics. We'll leave it with the group to see where the flow goes in terms of which of the particular topics that we might focus on. But as I say, the Causeway member plus the speaker will help guide you through the discussion. We'll come back again in 20 minutes. So over to you, Aoife, to just make us all magically appear and reappear.
Okay, I'll open the breakout rooms now, and just to add, the breakout room sessions aren't being recorded at all, so feel free for open chat. Okay, opening them now. Right, Stuart, I think that's most people back. If you want to kick off, you're on mute there.
There we go. Sorry, excellent. So sure there was some good discussion in the groups, and good to see we're keeping to time, which is always a challenge in these sort of fast-flowing events. So we're to say we'll not provide any feedback yet. We'll do that at the end of the next breakout session. So we'll go on to the next 2 topics, 2 short topics. First of all, we've got a presentation from, so I've got too many bits of paper here with my notes, from Chris Adams, involved in the sustainability strategy for City of Edinburgh Council. So over to you, Chris, and you're going to do old school with no slides. So.
That's right. I thought I would spare you having Death by PowerPoint all afternoon, and I would do this bit unaccompanied and a cappella. But what I didn't realise is that means I have my face full on with you all in big size. Cricket, that's awful. Right, never mind. Okay, so really briefly, what I'm going to do is cover the work that we're doing on our 2030 climate strategy. Edinburgh, like other cities, declared a climate emergency back in 2018 and made a commitment to be net zero by 2030, and we have been doing a lot of work over the past couple of years on what that means, how we get there, and we'll be publishing that plan in the wake of COP26 at the end of November. 30th of November is our launch date for that, and that's going to build on all the technical work we've been doing, plus input from about 3,000 citizens that we've gathered through the last couple of years. I guess if there's one thing I'm hearing a lot from today is that this is all about collaboration, space, partnership, and that's definitely the way we've been working with this strategy. We are one of 15 European cities who are being funded through European Union to be a climate deep demonstrator city. That lets us do some work around tests of change that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do. We've been working with the Place-Based Climate Action Network, just as cities like Leeds and Belfast have done as well. And they've given us really, really good net zero roadmap. That's given us science-based targets, given us quantified the challenge, which is scary, but also some of the opportunities. And we've also launched an independent Edinburgh Climate Commission. This is a group of independent specialists who are advising us on the steps we can take. And they're also challenging and also working with businesses to help businesses work and take the steps they need to be net zero. So a lot of good partnership work going on. And of course, the Chamber is in the room today working with us on a lot of this, as well as leading on their own work around circular Edinburgh, circular economy and other types of work. Now, one of the things all that does is it articulates really clearly what the challenge is for Edinburgh. What we essentially know that we need to do, because of the analysis we have so far, is to more than double the cut in emissions that we've made in the past decade over the next decade. So that's more than double the space, the speed that we're working on. So that's going to need investment, it's going to need speed and scale of opportunity. It means doing it in a historic city, which we were just talking about in the breakout zone. That's hard. It means doing it in a way that takes people with us, so a just transition. And it means doing it with real leadership and real governance, so that, again, that partnership works as a Team Edinburgh approach, working with governments, working with others where we can. All of that's hard, and the strategy is trying to articulate a way through that. If we just dwell on the challenge a little bit, because I think it's interesting, these numbers are, there's lots of numbers in this space, but I think these are quite good ways of just articulating the challenge that we have. Essentially, getting to net zero means a lot of things. It means big change in transport efficiency and big change in retrofit energy, amongst other things. If we look at the transport emissions side of things, we need to remove 5% of emissions from the city, from heavy goods and light goods vehicles. And we need to take 12.5% of our emissions out of personal car use. Now, in some ways that doesn't sound an awful lot, but it does mean in those spaces alone, a 12 times acceleration of the rate we're currently at. So that is a massive shift and a massive challenge, and the strategy needs to address that. We talked a lot about retrofit in the last session as well, and that piece about energy efficiency and heat and energy in buildings is another massive area that we need to lean heavily into. In domestic homes, we need to make a 25% cut in emissions that are being made in Edinburgh, and a 20% cut in office emissions. Now, again, in a historic city with lots of 200-year-old buildings, that's difficult, and we're working away hard on that. What we do know from the work that we've got, though, is that this is achievable. 65% of the emissions we need to get can be made with technology that is currently out there, and around about 60% will deliver a return on investment within their lifetime. So this is manageable and it is doable. And the message that we're giving is that actually, as in many other areas, Edinburgh is in a really good position to do this. We are, fastest growing city in Scotland, not as fast as Cork, but pretty fast by our own measures. We have the strongest economy in the UK for our type of city. We have the second largest financial sector. If no one else, if we can't mobilize those strengths around this challenge, then we don't think anyone else can. And we need to lean into that and show some leadership on this. Not least, we think this is a massive economic opportunity for the city. We are talking at the moment about transition and renewal from pandemic, and all of our plans around this are making sure that that renewal is green and it's fair. And that's why at that session, the 30th of November, we'll be launching our climate strategy with our plans and our mobilisation against everything I've just spoken about. But we'll also be launching our new Edinburgh economy strategy, which ties that together with what that means for skills, what that means for businesses, and what that means for people in the city. So I shall pause there. Happy to pick up on anything, but thanks for listening, and watch out for at the end of the month when there'll be much more flying out about Edinburgh. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. It was interesting what you said there about the difficulties retrofitting in historic cities, because it was one of the things we picked up in our breakout there, and I'm sure the 4 cities here have got similar challenges in that regard. But it's good that there's a view. Whilst it's a huge challenge, we've got the ability within what we currently already do and know to make decent headway. Albeit we're going to be told next week at COP, no doubt, that we're still not doing it quick enough, and we need to accelerate that change. So that's an added challenge. Okay, thanks, Chris. Now we'll go on to our last speaker now, Benjamin Bell, who is a Director of Public Policy within Tier Mobility. And Ben looks after sort of Northern Europe climate neutral tier mobility angle, and he's speaking on behalf of Dublin, but he's going to give a slightly different tack on the specific type of initiative that's developing in Dublin that we'll perhaps see elsewhere, or we are seeing some of it elsewhere. But over to Ben to explain more about it.
Thank you, Stuart, and thank you for the invitation today. Hopefully it won't be death by PowerPoint. It's literally 4 slides and I will rattle through them. So I've already been introduced, but for those who don't know TIER, we're Europe's largest micro-mobility operator, serving 155 cities now, from London to Paris to Dubai, with a mix of shared e-scooters, e-bikes and e-mopeds, as shown on the screen. We're a climate neutral company, but we're also run by a co-founder and CEO who has donated his entire stake in the business to sustainability causes. So next slide, please. In our view, the climate emergency doesn't stop at borders. It should matter to everyone, everywhere. And so today feels like the ideal time to explore the opportunities and the challenges facing the world when it comes together for COP26. Last month was August's report from the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change should be seen as a wake-up call for humankind. Climate change is progressing far more quickly than was anticipated. The latest assessment shows we're not on the path of a 1.5 degrees rise in global temperature, but instead heading more towards 2 to 3 degrees. That would mean irreversible changes to our climate system and more extreme weather events if we don't take radical steps. Now, the contributing elements around the world are countless, but mobility is a major factor responsible for up to, I think, over 20% of global emissions. And what's the situation in Dublin? So TomTom data shows the Irish capital is one of the most congested cities in Europe. And in terms of commuter hours lost to congestion, a recent study showed Dublin is actually the worst in Europe. And then meanwhile, nitrogen oxide levels in Dublin have been known to breach EU limits. This really matters because air pollution is behind thousands of deaths per year. And then what's the single biggest contributor to air pollution as part of that transport contribution? It's the car, no surprise. And then when you consider that cars spend 95% of their time unused, parked, and frankly, just using up space that otherwise could be repurposed for people, not cars, then we think that change is necessary. So next slide, please. The climate crisis goes to the heart of our purpose at TIER with, in our view, electrification and sharing of transport an absolute must. So we believe that citywide networks of shared e-scooters and e-bikes are central as part of a broader mix to ending dependency on cars and getting people onto sustainable mobility to advance that goal of a zero emission future. And that makes this week very timely indeed, because you may have seen the Irish Cabinet has approved legislation to legalise e-scooters for public roads. This presents an opportunity we believe to be grasped by cities like Dublin. And for micro-mobility to play an active role in decarbonising cities and creating safer, more equitable environments, the private sector, in our view, needs to play a much more active role and not be a passenger in working with the public sector on policies and solutions that shape the future of transport. So, for example, among a range of proposals that we've been pushing for, prioritisation of urban infrastructure towards 2 wheels, not 4, widespread e-scooter tendering to empower cities to better control micro-mobility, because historically it hasn't always worked well, and also to ensure the highest standards. And then lower barriers to public and private collaboration, from more harmonized data sharing to easier integration of transport services. But we also recognize that, when it comes to micro-mobility, Irish cities are having to take a bit of a leap of faith with a form of transport that is unfamiliar to them. So TIER has started a research trial that will help Dublin and wider Ireland up that change curve and learning about how to safely integrate e-scooters and e-bikes in a way that doesn't bring harm or street clutter. Next and final slide, please. So in July, we launched that trial at Dublin City University. It was unveiled by Transport Minister Nocton. We're working with Smart Dublin, Enterprise Ireland-backed startups and other local partners to allow Ireland to experiment with rental e-scooters in a safe, legal environment. So we've set up a scheme of 30 computer vision enabled TIER e-scooters on campus, and that aims to set a new bar for e-scooter standards with camera technology to detect pavement riding, as well as other aspects of the project that will encourage people to shift transport modes, as well as exploring these smart city possibilities associated with intelligent vehicles. We recognize that running a micromobility scheme to get people out of cars cannot be rushed. So there are also critical elements to get right and bring the wider public with you. First of all, safety. And that's not just about the likes of TIER, as we do, deploying the industry's safest vehicle, as well as a helmet on every trip, but also surrounding yourselves with the external experts. So we've convened an independent safety board, which comprises NCBI, the national charity representing the visually impaired, Disability Federation of Ireland, Age Friendly Ireland, and Irish Wheelchair Association, who are independent advisors to TIER, and they are tasked with oversight of our island operations. And then second, you need orderly parking. So rather than rely on what we would deem wildly inaccurate GPS technology, which could tell someone that their scooter's parked in the right place, but actually be 10 meters away, we use unique camera positioning software, which guarantees parking accuracy to within centimeters. And then third, we're exploring the ancillary benefits of micromobility. So we have what's called the energy network, whereby users can switch the batteries themselves when a scooter is on low charge, which not only offers them free perks like free trips, but also leads to extra footfall into stores, and then there are wider economic benefits, and also takes ops vehicles off the streets. And then, to wrap up, a few weeks after the launch of the trial, we were really proud to host the Taoiseach, Deputy Prime Minister Leo Varadkar, at our HQ to talk through the possibilities of a thriving mobility mix of public transport, bikes, scooters, and more, and to gain further backing for an approach that we believe can be a template for the future of sustainable transport in Ireland, not to mention Scotland, Northern Ireland, and beyond. And then ultimately, the aim of the trial is to help Dublin and other watching cities in managing their own schemes in future, because if we want to meet these ambitious emissions targets that we're all talking about, the goal of getting people out of cars and onto more sustainable mobility is not only desirable, it's absolutely necessary. Yeah, and that's us. I have to say, well, questions in future.
No, you're not.
I'm available on LinkedIn or anytime you want, email, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Thing is that, so what we're going to do now is go back to breakouts, and just, as you say, Causeway is all about networking. So when we go back, you'll be in different breakout groups, so you get to meet a different group of people. And this time, the focus of the topics are much more around the sort of sustainability and transport, picking up what we've just held there from Chris and Ben. So can we hit climate change targets through behaviour change and use of technologies alone? What are the top priorities within our cities to deliver our sustainable strategies? And how can public and private sector work together to achieve our sustainable goals? And I know there's probably an hour's worth of chat in each of those, but the challenge is you've got 20 minutes. We'll pick up the 3 points, and then we'll come back for a bit of a sum up at the end. So as with before, Aoife will push a few buttons and we'll appear into our various groups.
Great.
Just waiting on everybody.
I think that's probably everyone back now.
Yeah, a couple dropped off, didn't they? Just at that last bit.
5 o'clock.
Yeah, and I'm conscious that we were really not wanting to run this past 5 o'clock, but there was so much we wanted to try and cover. So what we want to do now is just get a bit of a feedback from our 4 speakers again on what came out of the discussions, and just maybe just a couple of minutes each, but we'll try and break it up again. So the first breakout session obviously covered a little bit more about the sort of buildings and city fabric, if you like, and what the challenges around retrofitting buildings and historic city centres and building technologies and people first. If we can maybe get some feedback from the 4 speakers on that, and then we'll pick up the second half, if you like, and I'll no particular order, but Roddy's first on my list. So if we stick, you're up first, Roddy, and what we'll try and do is we move round, we'll try and avoid repetition of points if you pick up a few other things, which is always a bit of a challenge in this feedback. But if we go with Roddy, then Chris, then James, then Ben, and then when we come to the second half, we'll reverse it. So we'll go Ben, James, Chris, Roddy. Right, over to you, Roddy.
Thank you. Yes, I could treat this like the generation game, if anyone's old enough to remember that. All the items. Ben won't remember all of that, so I won't do that. In the first group, on the first session, we talked very much about, I'll mention 4 things. I think the capacity building side of things, becoming aware, understanding the subject area a bit more is seen as a huge challenge, but also a huge opportunity, a huge part of the toolkit to help us to shift the dial on climate. Putting people first really speaks to that, and galvanizing our understanding enables communities to understand what needs to be done and how they can play a part and not be disaffected negatively by that. Technology, some solutions, we have the solutions, but how do we get them deployed? And then just, the kind of whole thing about the challenge of retrofitting, how we enable that shift was something that came across. I'll stop there. Others can mention other things, so I won't steal anyone's thunder. There's lots more to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, we in the first session, we talked about 2 things, really. We talked about retrofit, and we talked about the people part, how you bring people with you on this journey, how we allow people to lead the journey. In terms of retrofit, it's the scale of the challenge. We've got 4 cities here, all historic cities, all have historic cores. A real technical challenge in retrofitting those, but also a sense that maybe there's an opportunity there in terms of retrofitting demands a change in use for a lot of the spaces we're talking about. These are spaces which are already through behaviour changes, social changes, having to respond to change. So perhaps retrofitting offers an opportunity to do that, to bring people into parts of the city where they previously haven't been living, and connect some dots in that sense. Which again is all part of bringing people with us and making this the changes we make work for people. In this space, we talk a lot about engagement and a lot about consultation, and certainly in Edinburgh, we've been trying really hard to do that well in a meaningful way. But it can't just be about consultation. We've got to find a way of empowering people to make changes for themselves and to lead the change. Some of that means education and information, but there's much more out there how we encourage behaviour change and let people pick that up. And we touched that in the second session too, so I'm going to pick up more on that there.
Okay, good stuff. James?
Yeah, not uncommon themes really. I think 3 main points maybe. So very similar to the others, bringing the community with you, and community involvement and engagement was a high point that we picked on. Making data available to people actually was an interesting point that was made, that people can track their own carbon footprints and see what difference it makes when they make a change, was a point I thought was well made. And then of course, the whole retrofitting, the costs, the financial return, and who does it was a big thing we spoke about. And we spoke about probably the need for something like a national agency similar to what was done in transport in Ireland, as something that might be needed to act as the stick or the catalyst to make that happen.
Good stuff. And finally, Ben, anything else that you haven't heard so far in feedback?
Yeah, lots of familiar themes. So other new points to make was the increasing correlation between the shift as a company towards sustainability and the commercial benefits of doing so, whereas maybe a few years ago that was less the case. It felt more like a cost or a burden. And then also I just want to give a shout out to the amazing work of Natasha and team at Social Bite, who, in Edinburgh, for example, are building new prefab villages, as they're deemed, I think, if she can correct me otherwise, to house homeless people, where, yeah, they're starting out with 20 people sharing 10 properties. And yeah, it just sounds like an amazing project. And tying it back to this, it's, yeah, talking about how the greater ease of building sustainability into new builds rather than sort of retrofitting existing buildings. But yeah, great discussion, and thank you.
Natasha, I see Aoife's put you in the spotlight in the middle now. I don't know if you want to say anything else on what the project is in Social Bite. I know that Causeway were supporting you recently.
It's worth saying I didn't pay Ben anything for that, so I really appreciate that, Ben. Yeah, very quickly, like I said, homelessness charity. One of the programs we run is building these new social bite villages. We've already got one in Granton in Edinburgh, and we've been fundraising to build 2 more, one in Glasgow and one in London. And we just really feel the importance now more than ever that yes, our cause is homelessness, and these projects are about providing those in a situation of homelessness a safe, supported living environment where they can successfully get out of homelessness. They'll move on from these villages and reintroduced into society in their own properties. But we're very conscious that in building something new, this needs to be sustainable and energy efficient, and we need all the advice we can get, because we're not experts in that field. We're experts in what we deal with. So events like this are just brilliant, because although some terminology goes over our heads, we can certainly go away and research that, and the whole point of today around collaboration, we couldn't do that successfully without things like this. So thanks, Ben, and thanks everyone in the groups. Really, really insightful.
Thanks, Natasha. We'll go back to you now, Ben, because we'll pick up the second half, if you like, which was a bit more focused on transport and climate change challenge around, can we get there through behaviour and technology alone? What are the priorities in the cities, and how can public and private sector work together to achieve our sustainable goals? So again, if you want to kick off, and then we'll go around the rest of the other 3 after you.
Sure thing. I mean, I think ideally you'd get there with those sort of factors, but the reality is then they're never enough. But yeah, I think you want the carrot more and less stick. Using London as an example, they have had to take some pretty tough measures on drivers of cars in central London, punitive fees, making parking really difficult, etc. And I think that's really having an effect. But at the same time, behaviour change has also been brought about by offering people a more interesting and affordable and more sustainable transport mix. And also that includes a really convenient, accessible public transport network. Now, it's not clear that that is something that's a privilege to every city. And I know that we had discussions around how Dublin, Edinburgh and Glasgow in various ways have sort of varying standards of quality in that area. And it's one of the reasons that by not having that option being as attractive, that more people are encouraged, frankly, to drive into the centre, and that brings its own sustainability challenges. On a related note, I think Susan talked about Glasgow. You have a sort of it's not possible to sort of communicate to the whole population in one way, because actually the interesting thing is Greater Glasgow has a population of 1.2 million, Central Glasgow 600,000, and so a lot of people who spend their working day in the centre don't actually live there, and so you're having to send different messages and shift behaviours in a sort of non-consistent way, which presents its own challenges. Not everyone is sort of as bought into improving air pollution in the centre because they don't live there. Another point to make is actually from Glasgow, really cool example of improving public and private collaboration is there is a very active council leader who really believes in steering groups, and that is all around tackling a particular problem, be it COVID recovery or improving air quality and so forth. Someone who really likes to get around the table businesses as well as sort of policymakers and other decision makers, and that is Susan was advocating a really effective way to help drive change. And then just a buzzword that I've heard about in buzz phrase in Paris and Stockholm, but is now emerging in Scotland, according to Eugene, is the 20-minute city. Elsewhere, I've heard it called the 15-minute city. Scotland is taking probably a more realistic approach of everything being accessible within 20 minutes in their territories. Anyway, I've said enough. Over to others. Okay, thanks, Ben. James.
Yeah, I think, Ben, you've covered a lot of the points, to be fair. Yeah, I think to one of your points, the alternatives have to be in place and working well for people to change. That's quite obvious. I think we agree that, ideally it's more carrot than stick, but stick would be needed. I think that was quite a strong point. you know, in terms of public transport and alternative clean ways of transport, I suppose green ways of transport, it's not so much that it's beneficial to use it, but also there was an angle of that you are rewarded for using it on a point system, etc. So that's a kind of another incentive to get people involved. And I suppose we spoke about young people, actually. If we can get young people and the younger population changing and getting on public transport, which they are anyway, and getting on scooters, or reward them, because, you know, we spoke about Irish taxation or Irish fares on Irish public transport is reduced for under 25s in the latest budget. So that was a positive. And really involving people and educating people, I think Ben had covered the other points, really.
Good stuff. Chris?
Yeah, I think just pretty quickly, because I think Ben and James have covered most of this. Yes, technology is important, but it's not sufficient. There's definitely a people and behaviour-based aspect to it. But the third kind of point that Steph in our group from Farm and Carbon really emphasised really strong is that there's another element here, and that's the natural world. So it's the role of plants, the role of biodiversity, the role of trees in the city centre, planting areas in the city centre, urban farming. All of these aspects are a really important part of the mix.
Good stuff. And finally, Roddy.
Oh, yeah, transport came out, I think, as the top priority again.
Yep.
And related to that, behaviour change, getting people out of the car, the crashing irony of sitting in a traffic jam with an empty bus next to you speaks to that, and the infrastructure needs to be there to enable that change to happen, to give people the ability to make a more informed choice. And then I think, you know, there was a useful discussion, I think, about Bridget shared some insights around our obsession with stuff, which is absolutely spot on, I think, certainly in my opinion. And that speaks to some of the work that Glasgow Chamber is doing around circular economy and trying to think about how we reuse, we remanufacture, we reduce the amount of virgin materials, let's call them. So that came out. And I think finally, just one thought around something that we didn't discuss, but which is key to all this, is finance. How do we bring finance into the space and make that the investment happen, I guess, at scale and at speed. So that's a sort of closing point that we didn't discuss, but which was mentioned. I think it's important. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Roddy. And Bridget, you've appeared on the stage, so do you want to say anything on that basis or wrap up? Or
so I noticed the power of move somebody into the room, knowing I will always have something to say. So yeah, I suppose just building on what Roddy said, one of the kind of observations that I had is, as well as everything that we talked about in terms of, you know, local solutions in local cities, you know, combined solutions, the need to change behavior, to me, there was something about taking a fairly big step back and looking at where we are as people living on the earth in this time, the amount of inequality that we have, the challenges we have with climate change. There's a lot of quite massive problems that have happened in the last couple of generations. And linked to that is the obsession with stuff. So while a lot of our conversation is around traffic congestion and how we can improve that, and actually it maybe shouldn't be about whether I get another, you know, whether I replace my car with an electric car. It should be about how can we just have some kind of a major shift? How can we feel more responsible for the people on our planet, some of whom live in huge inequality, as well as the planet itself? And I suppose I find that easy as a shift to make because I spend time in India most years, not since the pandemic started, but I spend time in the slums of India. And when you see how the poorest people live, it makes you rethink. And not being preachy, as I said, my car is sitting outside. But I think maybe we need to make a major shift to address these issues more than the small shifts. And we're not there yet, but getting there.
We're getting there. Thank you very much. Okay, back to me now just to sort of wrap up, which bang on time. Well done, Aoife. So we're used to just to formally close and thank the four speakers. We would, as I said, we made them work and not just speak, but take part in discussions and take notes and feedback in the end. So well done. Thank you to Roddy, Chris, James and Ben. So feel free to give virtual applauses and thumbs up, whatever you want to do in Zoom world. So thanks to them, thanks to everybody else for participating in the session. It was quite fast flowing and we managed to just about achieve all we wanted to do in the formats. So that was excellent. This is, going back to the very start, we said about the whole ethos behind the Growing the Cities events was the fact that we believe in Causeway that the cities across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Ireland have got lots in common and can share ideas and share knowledge and hopefully learn from each other in some areas. And that's the whole point of this programme of events. And we'll see where we take it next. But, even just in the discussion today, we've had some really good examples of different cities just taking slightly different focus on some really excellent projects. And feel free to, it's a networking event through Causeway. So again, if you've wanted to try and catch up with someone that was on the call and didn't manage, get in touch with Aoife or Megan and they'll do that. I've seen Megan's on stage, which now means she's going to do a little plug, for something at the end, Megan, which we can't let people away without you covering. But just before I hand over to Megan, thanks all, and there'll be lots of other future events, and hopefully we at Causeway are really looking forward to hopefully some further events with the chambers as we go forward, because I think that's going to work well, and I think there's a great sort of synergy between what we're all trying to achieve. So I'll pass on to Megan.
Thanks everyone. Thanks so much to Stuart, all the chambers and everyone that contributed to this event. It's really appreciated, and everyone's insights, I think, have kind of brought it to the forefront of our minds again, which is so important to kind of keep bringing it back there. I guess the first thing just is all our guests are very welcome today. And if you are interested in knowing a little bit more about what it means to become a member of Causeway and the kind of benefits that can entail, and we are a business networking organisation, this is a little taster of kind of what happens with us throughout the year. So please get in touch with me. I'll probably be reaching out to you. I'd love to connect with everyone on LinkedIn as well. There we go. Here's Aoife bringing up our slides. Perfect. Thanks, Aoife. Get in touch. You can join through our website. That would be perfect. Then just to highlight a couple of our events that are coming up as well. I guess the most relevant one to everyone here is on the 25th of November, we have our kind of second event in our climate series for this year. So this is a focus on businesses tackling the climate emergency through innovation. So Steph from Farming Carbon is going to be there. Christian from Pawprint. There was actually a kind of shout earlier about kind of taking individual responsibility to understand what our carbon footprint has, and that's actually exactly what Pawprint, the app, does. So I think everyone will be really interested to kind of know a little bit more about that. So we'd love to see you all there. Also on the 2nd of November, I'd love to invite you all to our Connecting Causeway event. This is a really great opportunity to network with people as well as kind of hear from some of our members. And again, it's open to everyone. And you can find all of our other events on our website. So that's www.causewayexchange.net. So check that out. I'm more than happy to answer any questions, of course. And yeah, thanks so much to everyone coming. It's been a delight on this Thursday afternoon.
Perfect. And we finished a minute ahead of schedule, so even better. So final thank you from me, and I was going to say wish you all a safe journey home, but most of you are at home already, so not to bother with that. So hopefully see you all soon at a Causeway event or another networking event, and good luck with all those involved in COP26.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.